Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. 1 year ago, Germany assumed the presidency of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Today, we will be handing the presidency over to Greece, meaning Germany will take on a supportive role as a member of the Troika. As we all know, the events that have unfolded this past year have fundamentally affected both our world and the work of the IHRA. There is, of course, the corona pandemic and the need to work digitally. But I'm much more concerned by the negative consequences the pandemic has had. We have seen an unprecedented rise of anti-Semitism, anti-Gypsyism, and Holocaust distortion. It became clear how important the work of the IHRA has been and continues to be. I can only express my sincerest thanks to everyone who has made it possible for the IHRA to continue its important work advancing Holocaust education, remembrance and research worldwide. To all heads and deputy heads of delegation, working group and committee chairs, experts and representatives of permanent international partners, to Professor Yehuda Bauer, Professor Wichert ten Have and Sir Andrew Burns, to the North Macedonian delegation, to our technical support teams and, of course, the permanent office staff under the excellent leadership of Katrin Meyer, the IHRA Secretary General. Thank you for all you've done and for your enthusiastic participation. It's truly been a year like no other. So much has happened. It can be easy to forget that in between news cycles, so much has been achieved. We found ways to connect despite the distance, whether that meant helping each other navigate Zoom's pesky mute button, flying Stollen across continents to spread a bit of Leipzig holiday cheer, or joining together in commemoration of the victims and survivors of the Holocaust and the genocide of Roma. Our IHRA community has grown stronger this year. Being able to work together across time zones from Winnipeg to Berlin to Melbourne required more than just a working microphone and a stable internet connection. It required all of us to want to get something done, and we did. We saw the fruits of the IHRA's cooperative spirit early on, at our very first virtual plenary with the adoption of the IHRA Statement on Rehabilitation, and then soon thereafter with the adoption of the non-legally binding working definition of anti-Gypsyism, anti-Roma discrimination. We know the work that goes into drafting and adopting IHRA working definition. This process is not easy, but as we saw at the Leipzig plenary, it is certainly worth it. The IHRA's 3 working definitions of anti-Semitism, of Holocaust denial and distortion, and now of anti-Gypsyism, anti-Roma discrimination are important tools for raising awareness of these issues. They are being used in so many different fields to sensitize people to these phenomena, from law enforcement, educators, and the judiciary to opera singers, footballers, and beekeepers. Problems that can be identified are harder to ignore, and anti-Gypsyism is one that has persisted for centuries, fueled as well by the neglect of the genocide of Roma perpetrated by Nazi Germany and its collaborators. Prejudice, discrimination, and violence still exist, and this is deeply troubling. Let us not forget, among the victims murdered during the racist attack in February 2020 in Hanau, Germany, 3 were Roma. Soraya Post, former Swedish member of the European Parliament and Roma activist, can tell you more about why the IHRA's latest working definition is so important.
Dear delegates of IHRA, my name is Soraya Post. I'm a Roma woman from Sweden. I'm also a former member of the European Parliament. I feel very honored to have this intervention and also very grateful for your work under the working definition of anti-Gypsyism and that you finally recognize this in October. And a special thanks to the German Presidency and Ambassador Michalea Küchler. I am 64 years old, and I used to say that I was born condemned because of my ethnicity. It was not easy in Sweden in 1956 with a Roma mother and a Jewish father. So I have seen anti-Gypsies. I have lived anti-Gypsies since I was born. Having a mother and father who were denied to give birth to more children than two. Because, when my mother was pregnant for the third time, in the 7 months of pregnancy, she was forced sterilized by the Swedish government. And she always thought about this. And also for myself, every day in the daily life was a hard struggle against anti-Gypsies. To declare that you should be equal, that you have the same respect as other people, always to know that you are a second-class human being is not very easy, and it's not easy to develop a future. When I became a mother, I decided to take a fight, to struggle, to have anti-Gypsies recognized, and to express my personal experience, my family's experience, try to get people understand what is behind all this and how can the majority society live with this. Of course, it escalated when the Second World War was the determination of so many people. We should have learned more. For several decades, we have tried to fight against the social acceptance and the denial of this specific form of racism, which targeted Roma and Sinti for centuries. When I was a member in the European Parliament, so in 2015, we achieved that 2nd of August is recognized as the European Roma Holocaust Memorial Day. In the same resolution, we had the recognition of anti-Gypsies as a specific form of racism towards Roma. So I see that it is a major step that all delegates and members of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance finally agreed on to recognize anti-Gypsies based on a working definition. So I would like to call up all government institutions to adopt the IHRA working definition on anti-Gypsies and to apply it in the practice in all spheres of life. It is a duty and responsibility for all of us. I firmly believe that we need to have discussions about what the Roma have gone through for centuries and what we are facing even today. There is a long way to healing. The IHRA working definition is a powerful tool for this. So I'm very grateful on behalf of all Roma. Thank you very much. I would like to see a happy and healthy European society, free from anti-Gypsies, free from all forms of racism. And this is not only for the benefit of Roma or Sinti, but for the common good of the entire society. Together, I believe and strongly know that we can make it. Thank you.
But of course, our work didn't end there. In addition to rising anti-Gypsyism, we saw early in the pandemic many turning to Holocaust distortion to protest coronavirus measures. We witnessed people holding up signs that said, "Vaccination macht frei." We saw how they pinned yellow stars to their shirts and compared themselves to Sophie Scholl or Anne Frank. However, as we saw Holocaust distortion become a common feature at these demonstrations, the IHRA was speaking out about the dangers distortion poses to society and to democracy. And just days after, we saw people in Camp Auschwitz sweatshirts storming the US Capitol. The IHRA's Global Task Force Against Holocaust Distortion launched its recommendations for policy and decision makers on recognizing and countering it. They show that we need to work together to collect more data, engage social media companies, strengthen memorials and museums, develop training programs, and sensitize decision makers. Our recommendations are the starting point for a movement with politicians cooperating with international experts to build a global coalition against Holocaust distortion. International cooperation will be crucial to the success of our efforts. These recommendations couldn't be timelier, as the IHRA's Honorary Chairman Yehuda Bauer will explain.
One of the major issues that the German Presidency dealt with is the definition and proposals for action against Holocaust distortion. Because distortion does not mean denial. Denial of the Holocaust is saying that the moon is made of white cheese, but distortion means that you recognize there was a Holocaust. But it's not we, whoever the we is, who did it. It's they, only they, the Germans who did it. And we actually, whoever the we is, we try to help the Jews and we rescue the Jews and we now create museums for them and we create statues and memorials and all the rest of it. And we deny the fact that Nazi Germany could never have done what it did without the support of smaller or larger numbers of collaborators when our past does not necessarily fit what we think it should have been. Then we invent a past that never was. A past that can be used by our own nationalist ideology or nationalist movement or governments or whatever. And IHRA has to develop its programs, develop its expertise in order to find the ways, to find the tools to fight this very, very dangerous development of distorting the past, because the IHRA is, of course, about the past and education about it. And in that sense, I sincerely hope we shall progress in the year that is in front of us. Thank you very much.
We've already seen world leaders take notice, but this is just the beginning.
Offenem wie auch verdecktem Antisemitismus, der Leugnung wie auch der Relativierung des Holocaust müssen wir uns mit aller Entschiedenheit entgegenstellen. Das leitet uns auch während der deutschen Präsidentschaft der Internationalen Allianz zum Holocaust-Gedenken.
Demonstrating their resolve, the IHRA, the European Commission, the United Nations and UNESCO are already working together to raise awareness of Holocaust distortion with a year-long social media campaign called #ProtectTheFacts. Momentum is building around the world to take action against distortion. I'm looking forward to where this will lead. International cooperation has characterized so many of this year's activities. We also work together with the European Commission to put together a handbook on one of the IHRA's most useful awareness-raising tools, the IHRA Working Definition of Antisemitism. Organizations all over the world have already started making use of the handbook, as Francis Kalifat from the Conseil Représentatif des institutions juives de France will explain.
On ne peut que se réjouir et féliciter la présidence allemande et l'ambassadrice Michalea Küchler pour avoir réalisé et publié ce guide pratique sur l'utilisation de la définition opérationnelle de l'antisémitisme de l'Alliance internationale pour la mémoire de l'Holocauste. Ce manuel permet de rendre plus concrète la définition de travail de l'IHRA et facilite son application par les autorités de police, de justice et d'éducation, car elle vient illustrer la définition de l'antisémitisme par des incidents antisémites réels. Il répond aux difficultés rencontrées par les magistrats et les policiers pour identifier les incidents antisémites. Et c'est une avancée incontestable dans la lutte contre l'antisémitisme sous toutes ses formes. Ce guide est un outil indispensable dans la lutte contre l'antisémitisme à un moment où le monde, et l'Europe en particulier, sont envahis de théories conspirationnistes visant les Juifs et l'État d'Israël.
We've seen the IHRA accomplish a tremendous amount this year. We have strengthened our efforts to advance Holocaust education, remembrance and research, to counter anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial and distortion. We are more connected than ever before and in a unique position to implement the tools we've developed together this year. Thank you all again for your committed engagement. I wish my Greek colleagues only the greatest success. I stand ready to continue to assist in any way I can, though I hope we can meet in person soon. I am confident that the IHRA will continue its important work with or without social distancing. It has been an honor to serve the IHRA.
Hello, can you hear me?
Are you able to hear me okay?
I hope you can all hear me.
Can you hear me?
Thank you for the floor. Do you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
I understand we cannot be seen, but I hope we are heard.
Do you hear me?
You must unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, can you hear me well?
Hello, can you hear me?
Are you able to hear me okay?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I hope you can hear me well.
Do you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I hope you can hear me.
I hope you can hear me.
Do you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay.